Good morning or good afternoon. This is Roxana Colman-Herak with Good Medicine, and we do have some good medicine for you today. So stay tuned, get your popcorn. This could be a long program. Today we have with us Marine Sergeant Chuck Lewis, and he's got quite a story. We also have James Knapp, who is a veteran, and he's going to be talking about his story in the military, where he served, why they went in the military, what that's meant to them. So first I'd like to welcome both you, Chuck Lewis and James Knapp, to our program.
Thank you.
Let's just jump right into this thing. Let's get the ball rolling here. So tell me a little bit about, you have a t-shirt on that says Walking for the Fallen USA. What's that about?
Well, for me, it started about 7 years ago, where I wanted just to bring attention to those serving overseas and not being home at Christmas or Thanksgiving, because I remembered what it was like during that time frame for myself. And then it kind of escalated. I started adding items to my display, flags and battle cross, and people started donating money, and then I didn't know what to do with it. And so then we had a Marine from Ronan come home, Corporal Tommy Parker, and he came home and he had been wounded. He stepped on an IED, lost both legs and part of his left hand. And when he did, then it became clear what the monies were going to go for, and that was to support those veterans that become wounded or disabled. And so that's where that money was going to go. And then a couple of years after that, a young Marine came home who wasn't wounded physically, but he was wounded mentally.
Are most of them wounded?
And he did 4 years in the Corps, same as Tommy. And when he got home, he separated from the Marine Corps on 3 June of 2012, arrived home on 4 June of 2012, and we buried him on 30 June of 2012. And he had taken his own life. He committed suicide. And this was right here in St. Ignatius. And so a lot of people think, well, that doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen in my hometown. But in this case, it did. And when it did, it was amazing to me. As I folded his flag, it occurred to me that none of the veterans I knew he was home until we were called to bury him. And so then I started looking into what suicide was all about and saw that it was a nationwide issue. So I took what I had called Standing for the Fallen into Walking for the Fallen, and I had to figure a way to get to the people. How do I get in their face? I don't see myself as being a great speaker, so I had to figure out another way. And my way was just to put all my gear in a cart and push it across the country. And it took me 5 months and 26 days to get from Everett, Washington to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C.
That's quite a journey. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and go into more depth on that. James, tell us a little bit about what it was about the military that attracted you to the Marines.
What attracted me to the Marines was, it was my staff sergeant who recruited me, actually, Staff Sergeant Neil Yazzie. He was my recruiter. There was also 2 other gentlemen there. I believe they were sergeants. I can't remember their names off the top of my head. But I saw Staff Sergeant Neil Yazzie at Walmart one day, and he was riding a motorcycle, and I was commenting on how his motorcycle, was real nice, and I was like, I want a motorcycle like that. And then he was like, well, I got it when I was working for the Marine Corps in here, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I've always been military oriented. My dad's Navy, so I was kind of like, well, maybe I should join the Marine Corps. And then I started talking to him more about it, and then he came to my school. He set up a visit to my school, made me came down, we talked, and I kept talking to him, and he was kind of a big influence to bring me into the Marine Corps for me, I would say, because, I was always wanting to get out of Montana and get away from the reservation for a bit. It was my big thing, was just trying to get out and see the world, and that's what I wanted to do. And he was like, well, that's one big thing, is we do deploy you a lot of places, and I did. I went to a lot of different places. But it was just, I don't know, I guess it was being a family thing too. It's for me, it's my dad's Navy, my grandpa was Navy on my dad's side, and then my mom's side, my grandpa was in Marine Corps. So it's kind of a long line of military members for me, so I just kind of military oriented anyways.
Yeah, you were predestined for the military.
Pretty much, I believe. But I mean, it wasn't like predestined, I guess. I guess it just because I wanted to do something that I know would be making a change instead of just being another number from the reservation, kind of falling to drinking or falling to drugs. I wanted to make a difference. I didn't want to be just, another number on the reservation that didn't go unnoticed or something like that. I was like, I want to make a difference. I still want to make a difference. That's why, I volunteered to do whatever I can when I can outside of work.
You talked a little bit before the program about, back in the day, there were friends that you had where they had an option. They could either do prison time or they could go in the military. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've had a friend or two that was kind of always on the wrong side of the law. He was always in trouble and stuff. They finally gave him the option and said, hey, we can send you to jail for a long period of time, or you can go and serve for our country. And he chose, hey, I'm going to go serve for my country. And he's done a 180 from the military. It broke in him from his, I don't know how to put it, his mischievous ways. But he served, and I proudly served with him. And he definitely changed. He's motivated. Now he goes out and he makes influences over other people to do the right thing, not to keep doing the mischievous things that they have been doing. Try to get them away from the drugs and alcohol. That's a big thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal that's going on. I think not only here. I think it's pretty much across the board. And I've always thought the military was good as far as structure, kind of getting your stuff together. Why did you go in the military?
Well, I served during Vietnam, and it was a little different then in the sense that...
Draft?
Well, if in those days, they were just looking for a warm body, and if you were warm, you were good to go. And with that in mind, today, if you went to jail first, then there's a good chance you would not go into the military. And so if you have that option, military or jail, then that's a good thing because they'll get you into the military. But if you go to jail first, like I did, the judge I had was just a little bit backwards. And
they all are.
Oh, they all are. But I mean, he was right on the mark. But basically, he, instead of giving me that option of, well, you can go into service or you can go to jail, he sent me to jail first. And I spent my time there, and then I got out, and they dropped me off in Bakersfield, California on the courthouse steps, and I'm 150 miles from home wondering how I'm going to get home. And there happened to be an induction center across the road from me, and they had all 5 branches of the service, and I thought, well, I'm 18, I know everything, and I'm going to go in there and talk to them and see who's going to give me the best deal. And it happened to be that the Marine Corps was the first door I walked on into, and it was the first door on the left, as I remember. And they said, well, we can sign you up for 2 years, but there's not a great demand for people to know how to shoot machine guns and throw hand grenades. But for 4 years, we can give you an aviation guarantee. And with that in mind, it was like, oh, wow, I had visions of flying and everything else. But really what it meant at that time was that I was going to be at air bases knowing how to shoot machine guns and throw hand grenades. And but actually, in the long run, that's where I learned my career in electronics. And so it made me who I am today in more ways than one. It allowed me, after my 4 years, to go into back to school, get an education, and I got a career in electrical engineering, and it took me to working for the government in weapons development, and I did that for 27 years. And so now I still feel like I owe something to our country, and it's still an honor to serve. I guess is the bottom line. I don't know how old James is, but I'm 63. But just from what we know of each other, whether you're 24 or whether you're 63, almost 40 years difference, we still have a love for our country, and it doesn't go away. I mean, there's an old saying, once a Marine, always a Marine,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's more than just a title. It is a title that we've earned, and it's one that's with us the rest of our life.
So, what were you in jail for?
Taking things that didn't belong to me.
Very good. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what some of these words mean. You know, we went up to the event that they had kind of honoring veterans at Blue Bay, which was just really awesome. That's how I kind of got connected with both of you. I want to talk a little bit about freedom, and I just want to throw some words out and see what you do with these words, because they're words that we don't really, all the time that I was going through school, I never really learned anything about the flag other than you stand up and you say, I pledge allegiance to the flag, blah, blah, blah. It really didn't have any meaning until I kind of met you, and you kind of broke down the words of the flags, the courage. Let me throw some words out to you. Loyalty and honor.
Well, I think I'd rather talk about freedom. And while those are two important words, when you look at the word freedom, I mean, you talk about the Pledge of Allegiance, and I saw, by the way, that you'd posted Red Skelton on your Facebook page.
Loved it.
So I would encourage, I show that video every time I give a presentation because I think it's so important. But it talks about one nation under God, indivisible. And when you talk about one, you talk about unity. And from that, honor comes from that. But when you talk about freedom, you know, sometimes people don't really understand what freedom is all about. And when you think about the word freedom and what we have here, so many people take it for granted. A favorite saying of mine is that while everybody has the capability of standing for something, it might be a brave person that tells you what they're going to stand for, but it's a person of courage that will show you, that will actually stand up. And when you think about freedom and you think about what we have here, you know, we look at the veterans and of course what we contribute, but what they don't see behind the scenes is the families that support us. And that's really kind of an interesting twist, because the things that we face in combat is not just about us, it's about those that love us too. But when you go back to the word freedom again, and you think about what we have here, if you were in Afghanistan or Iraq, and you know, you wouldn't be here right now. You would have a woman or a man in your position. The women would be at home and they'd be taking care of the family. And you think, well, being at home is no big deal, that's pretty cool, but you don't have electricity, you don't have water. You know, you want to go get water, you go down to the city well, and then you haul it back, and that's to cook, that's to wash. You want to sweep the floor, you don't have linoleum or carpeting, you have dirt. You know, and there's those kind of facets to what the woman does. Even the men, when you think about the, you know, like that doesn't sound very glamorous for the woman, but even the men, they don't always have a choice about what they want to do. The government dictates what they're going to do as a career. I had a choice. I mean, I could have gone into anything when I got out of the Corps, and I could have gone, just like coming here to the college and picking a career and going, that was my choice. But in Afghanistan and Iraq, you don't have that choice. The government tells you what you're going to do, what you're going to be. And you know, we have these freedoms here in the U.S. Other countries don't have it.
So it doesn't come easy. I mean, there's a sacrifice, really. There's a lot of sacrifice. What was your experience like in Afghanistan? You were there for 8 months.
Yeah, I was there for about 8 or 9 months. I was part of a partnering team. I had left and it was a 20-man team. I had my captain, and then there was my first sergeant, there was a couple lieutenants, then a bunch of sergeants, then my corpsmen, my HM3s, and then my one other corpsman who was a rank lower than I was at the time. I can't remember, I think he was an HN, I'm not too sure. But I was the lowest ranking member of my team. I was an E4 at the time, deployed. And everybody else is E5 and above, so you know, I was pretty much outranked on everything, whatever somebody said I had to do. But I was doing a E5 or E6 position for myself because I was a communications, I was a radio operator, so I went on almost every patrol. You know, went out, did a lot of driving for the CO. I did a lot of that stuff. It was while I was out there, you know, like Chuck was saying, there's not many choices for women to do anything. You know, even if I was there I still couldn't talk to a female because it was, you know, I can't talk to females over there. It was a bad, like I guess they weren't allowed to associate with men at all. And I mean, they had to cover their faces and bodies fully. The only thing you could really see was their hands and their eyes, and that was it. You know, that was pretty bad. When they were children, you didn't have to worry about covering yourself as much. You could still play as a kid when you were a girl, but you didn't, like when I would go on patrols, I would give candy out to the kids. I'd give a piece to every kid, and when they were walking away, the boys would go beat up the girls and take their candy from them. So they didn't, like they said, like Chuck was saying, you don't have your freedoms to do things like you. Like if I were here and I gave a bunch of kids candy and then the boys tried to take it from the females, they'd get in trouble for that.
Well, that girl would probably just beat up that boy.
Yeah, that too. You know, she has that opportunity, but over there they don't. It's different. It was a culture shock to me. It was a whole different aspect. And that's what they train you for, is the culture shock. You're going to see the differences in the way they live. You know, it's kind of like 100 years, 200 years behind us. They have cell phones, electronics, but not everybody has them. Only the privileged few that do use it. And a lot of the elders are over there. They, you know, the Shiri law. What they say is law. So sometimes the elders have more control than the government does. So the government could say something, and the elders would say something. You know, this is my son. I don't want him to go to jail. The government's like, no, he has to go to jail. He's Taliban. Government elder says no, kid gets released. It's
and you know, like you wouldn't have to worry about going shopping. You know, you wouldn't worry about going to Target. You wouldn't worry about whether you got your hair cut. You wouldn't have to worry about makeup anymore. You know, it's just those things. You know, they seem so simple, but they don't have those freedoms to do that. And it's an interesting twist, and then the form of judicial punishment is so much more violent. I mean, you know, you think about what they do in the court system here in the U.S. as far as doing the most they can for the victims, doing the most they can for the person that created the crime, but yeah, and then they try to make it, you know, send them to jail there. You know, they die by stoning. They you know, and it's quick. I mean, they don't waste any time. I mean, it happens today, and so we, you know, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of us feel honored to be able to go. I mean, a lot of people don't understand. They think our government sends us there, and they do. They do, and a lot of people think, well, we shouldn't belong there. But, you know, and for us, the military, those, not the politicians, those of us that are serving, we see the lifestyle that they lead. And if we can, you know, bring them to a level that we are, you know, it's something that we want to try to do.
Is there resistance, this question for both of you, is there resistance in them wanting to be like us?
When I was over there, I noticed that a lot of them actually reacted really well to us being there. They, you know, came to us a lot and they would talk to us. I know that a lot of the males would come up to me, you know, congratulate me and ask me about America and where I was from. And, you know, one day they wanted to, if they could ever get the chance, they would like to come to America to see what it was like. You know, a lot of them were like that. I mean, I never got the resistance, but then there was some that didn't like it. They would get really mad when you bring it up. They wouldn't talk to you. They'd ignore you. But those were the ones sometimes that had ties or something to the Taliban, or and that was a big thing down there. Was with my police officers, my Afghan police officers, was some of them had ties and were working with the Taliban. I mean, it was pretty bad at times. They would go out. I remember my police while we were there. They, you know, it was, but a lot of them reacted really well. And I know my interpreter, he was from Afghanistan initially. He has family there in Kabul, and he made the effort to go out and be an interpreter, learn English, so he could be an interpreter for us. And I learned a lot from him, and that's how I got my NAM, is because I learned how to speak Pashto and everything without my interpreter there. I could do my BAT system, which is a biometric automated system that would do your fingerprints and your iris on your eyes. And so I could put them in a system so that way we could run them and make sure they had no associate ties if they come up, you know, high-level value targets, and they would come up as a red screen on my thing, and I'd have to isolate them. But a lot of times there was never really, a lot of people actually didn't mind us being there, but then there was a lot that didn't like us being there, in the part I was in.
Sounds like that would be a really important part. I mean, when you're in a third country, it would be hard to know really who's who, I would think. So having...
That's just like being in America, you know, it's like the same thing. You have people here that don't like the way the government's running, and they got, you know, but you can't tell who's, you know, who. Everybody's an American here. Everybody on this soil is American. They are, or they're from another country, but you know, a lot of them are Americans, and you can't tell if they're, you know, for the government or against the government. You can't tell that by just looking at somebody. Unless you look at their actions, what they do. And I mean, even then, you still have to get to know the person. You have to sit down, like in Afghanistan, we would sit down and have tea. That was their big thing. It was always inviting us over for tea. And they had like, it was really good tea actually. I can't remember what kind of tea it was, but you know, that was a big thing for them, was to have sit down and talk about things that we could do to make it better over there, to help, you know, how they could change the irrigation, or how they could make things better for themselves while they're there. You know, that was a big thing. I don't know. It's good to see that some of these guys want to see the change. They want to try to change from what they have been to a newer society, to try to make things better, I would say. But like I said, it's hard to tell friend from foe. You just can't tell by looking at them. And that's always a big thing over there too, if it come to war, when it comes to like the firefight, you couldn't tell who was friend or foe when you were getting shot at unless you saw the AK in their hands. You never knew.
Can you add to that? What was your experience like?
Well, you know,
because there's got to be parallels between Vietnam, probably some pretty significant parallels.
Well, there are parallels when you think about the people. I mean, and I think the key word in either Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq is control. And it's those that don't have control are the ones that would embrace our way of life, our freedoms that we have. It's the ones that are in control that want to maintain the control. And they're going to keep a thumb on those people, because I mean that's how they keep everything in line, is that they want to control everything and keep people in fear. As far as, you know, you don't do what we tell you, then you're going to pay for it. And whether it was Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, it's the same mentality. And so it's kind of an interesting twist there, that you know, well, do they embrace the Western culture? Do they like the freedoms we have? Would they like to come to the country? Those that aren't in control, sure, they would love to have a democracy there. But those that are in control know that a democracy will not allow them to have the control over the people that they want. And it goes for all three countries the same way. The government wants to control the people, and that's what it comes down to. And when you look at them, you know, when you look at our Constitution, you look at our Bill of Rights, and you think about the Second Amendment, for instance, you know, it's like there was a saying back during World War II, when after the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, they wanted to step it up and attack the U.S. And one of their leaders said, no, we're not going to do that, because behind every blade of grass is a weapon, because our people have weapons, you know, we have guns. Under our Second Amendment allows us the right to bear arms. And they knew that they weren't just going to be going up against the military, they would be going up against the people. But you look at these other countries, they don't have weapons, they don't have that Second Amendment, and it makes it a whole lot easier for the government to control them when they know that they're going to uprise and they're going to come after you with shovels and picks and rakes.
You know, there's something to be said for when you're having a battle on your homeland, your home ground. It's like protecting your home. It's like when you have to go out and you serve your country in their country, it seems like the odds would be maybe a little bit unfavorable, regardless of the weapons. It's like, because when you think about that, you know, if there was somebody that was breaking into my home, I'm going to probably be pretty tenacious about protecting family, protecting home. What's your perspective on that?
Well, they don't have anything to protect. You know, their protection is a table, what they can hide behind, what they can hide under. That's their protection. And when I went on my walk, I was gone for, you know, over 6 months total. And you know, leaving my wife home alone, and I you know, we talked about the idea of having a weapon, how to use it, and stuff like that, because a closet in your home or a table in a restaurant offers no protection for those that are going to be the victim in this case. And so, you know, I kind of have strong feelings toward the Second Amendment, and I think everybody should be their own first responder. Protect yourself, protect your family, and that's the way I see it. I would never allow anything to happen to my wife, and I carry a weapon with me most of the time. Whether it's concealed or unconcealed makes no difference. I have it, and I would use that to protect my wife, or I would not allow her to say, "Here, hide behind this table." Mm-hmm. It isn't going to work.
We're going to talk a little bit more about this. You know, I knew this was going to be. There's a lot more that we're still going to cover. We're going to roll this right over into another segment, so I want you to stay tuned. We'll be back, and we're going to delve into this walk across the country, kind of what that experience was like, and kind of get back into the explanation of what freedom and all of those tiers that go with that flag. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned.